everyone, it's Jennifer from Flux. In this video, I'm going to show you how to crochet this gorgeous silver spruce button shawl. This is a lovely closed shell stitch pattern that if you joined us for our summer cowl, the spa getaway cowl, we used this stitch and a lot of you really liked it. So I wanted to kind of introduce it to some other projects that we have too. So it makes a nice, kind of like a dense, not like a lot of decorative holes. So it's very cozy and very beautiful. And we're doing this in 2 different colors, kind of like a color block look. We're going to do 4 different sections. And so I really enjoyed using the same stitch in different colors to kind of show it off. We're going to learn how to work the shawl itself. And then the edge, when we finish, we're going to be adding some wonderful button loops to our piece so we can button it together. Now, a buttoned shawl is really nice to have because it stays put, and you can hop on over to the blog, the link is below, and you can see all the different ways you can button it. You can button it very simply like I have here, but you can also unbutton some of it and sort of make a collar and wrap it different ways. It's a really fun and versatile piece to kind of play around with. So we're going to learn how to do the entire thing from start to finish, from crocheting the shawl to creating these button loops to sewing the buttons and doing all the finish work. So let's get started. The finished shawl measures about 50 inches long. Now that's unbuttoned and opened up. And it is about 12 inches wide. And I'm using 1-inch tall buttons. You can use any button size you like. You can do a little tiny row of small buttons. You could do larger buttons. I'm going to show you later on in the video how to add chains if you want to make these loops bigger to accommodate a larger button. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. A tape measure is super helpful to get the size in particular that you're after. We're going to be using a 6mm J crochet hook. This is my Furls Odyssey. I'll put the link down below and a coupon code if you'd like to get one for yourself. And I'm going to put some cute little wood decorative buttons. Now, as a side note, I got these with a like a print. It's kind of like a filigree print on the front, but I really like the plain look. So for this project, I'm flipping the buttons over. I liked the way they looked with this yarn better. So let's talk a little bit about the yarn. I'm going to scoot all this stuff over a little bit so we can bring this front and center. I'm going to be using this lovely kind of grayish, looks like a cloudy day kind of color, and then this like spruce green color. Now, these are 2 different yarns. I'm using some things I have on hand, but I'll tell you about them in case you're interested, but I'm also going to tell you about some substitutions if you'd like to do that. The spruce green color I have is called Knitology by Knit Crate, and this colorway is called Mist. This is a worsted weight yarn. It's a merino wool silk alpaca blend. And again, it's worsted weight. Each one of these is 149 yards. The other color I'm using is called Aldine Wools by Knit Crate. And this is called Aldine Wools Halo DK, and the colorway is Ash. This is an alpaca merino nylon blend, and each one of these is 236 yards. Now, if you notice, I have a worsted weight here and I have a DK weight here. And I did that. I chose them because I like the colors together, but I don't normally mix yarn weights. But this yarn here has a very smooth, kind of silky strand. And this yarn here is a very fluffy, kind of poofy yarn, if you will, for lack of a better term. But I felt like the yarn weights were similar enough to use them together in a project. Now, if you need to substitute yarn, you'll need, this is a total of 770 yards. So this is a wonderful scrap project. You can kind of pick and choose different things you may have on hand, which is exactly what I did. Just look for 770 yards of a worsted weight yarn and you'll be just fine. I really think this one is poofy enough to complement this one and it'll be just fine. So that's sort of why I did that. But 770 yards of worsted weight yarn and you'll be just fine. Now, if all you have is DK on the flip side, just know your piece will be a little bit narrower, but I will give the multiples if you'd like to use any other weight you choose as well. You can be, if you want to use yarn on hand, you can use other weights too, and I'll give the multiples so you can kind of customize it as well. So 770 yards of worsted weight yarn. So let's get started. We're going to begin by working our starting chain. Now our starting chain is a multiple of 6 plus 1. So if you're not familiar with that concept, that just means when you do your starting chain, to change the width of your piece, you want to go 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 and so forth until you get the width that you want, and then add one more chain onto that. So a multiple of 6 plus 1. We are going to do a starting chain of 55, okay? So what we want to do is put a slip knot on our hook to begin. Wrap the yarn around your fingers to make a loop, bring the yarn behind the loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. Then we're going to do our starting chain, and again, 55 chains on that. You can change it by working your multiples if you like. So to make a chain, wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 51, 52, 53, 54, and 55. So here's our starting chain, and that will give you an idea of the width that you would like your piece to be. You want to make it kind of wide because it is going to wrap around you. And when you're doing your chains, you want them to be loose enough that you can work into them when we start working our stitches, but you don't want them to be so loose that they look sloppy. So if you're having trouble with your chains being too tight, I do get this question a lot. Go up a hook size. In this case, it would be the K hook. And then you can go back down to the J for the rest of your project. But try working your chains in one size hook up if you're having trouble with that. Next, we're going to start on row 1. For row 1, we're going to work 2 double crochets in the 4th chain from the hook. So this loop here does not count. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this chain here, we'll work 2 double crochet. To make a double crochet, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert the hook into that chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. Then we're going to work a second double crochet into that chain as well. And then what we're going to do is skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and then work a single crochet into the next chain. So insert the hook into that chain, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through both loops. Then we want to skip 2 chains, 1, 2, and in the next chain we'll work 4 double crochets this time. So 1, 2, 3 double crochet, and 4 double crochet. All right, so then we're just going to kind of repeat all this. We're going to skip 2 chains, in the next chain work a single crochet. Skip 2 chains, in the next chain work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skip 2 chains, work a single crochet. Just like that. Skip 2 chains, work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skip 2 chains, work a single crochet. Skip 2 chains, work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skip 2 chains, work a single crochet. Skip 2 chains, work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skip 2 chains, work a single crochet. Skip 2 chains and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skip 2 chains, work a single crochet, skip 2 chains and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Skip 2 chains, work a single crochet after that. Skip 2 chains, work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, we're almost to the end of the row and you should have 3 chains left. So in the very last chain, so skip 2 chains, in that very last chain work a single crochet to end. Okay, so row 1 is complete and we have some lovely little shells happening here. It looks very nice. And so let's move on to row 2 next. For row 2, what we're going to do is chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to turn our work. And then what we're going to do is work 2 double crochets in that first single crochet from the previous row. So right here at the beginning, remember we worked that single crochet at the beginning of the row? It'll look like a little, right before that first shell, you'll see a little like hole there, okay? So work 2 double crochet into that single crochet, 1 and 2. And then what we're going to do is work a single crochet in the center of this fan that we see. So remember our fan or our shell, whatever you want to call it, was 4 double crochets. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4. See that? In the middle, the very middle, in that space, okay, right in the middle space there, work a single crochet. Just like that. And then what we're going to do is work 4 double crochets in the single crochet that's in between those 2 shells. So the one we just worked in and then the one that we see next, there's a single crochet in between that. We're going to work 4 double crochets, okay? So 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? And then once again, we're going to hop to that next shell. And right in the middle of it, you can kind of, what I like to do is take my thumbs and sort of like separate it out so I can see it really well. You can see those 4 double crochets right in the middle, that middle space, work a single crochet, just like we did before in that last shell. Okay, go to that single crochet in between the shells and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, work your single crochet in the center of the next shell. Go to the single crochet between the next 2 shells and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Double crochet. Go to that next shell, work a single crochet in the center. Go to the single crochet in between the shells and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just like that. Go into the center of the next shell and work your single crochet. Remember, in between, right in the middle there. Go into that single crochet in between those shells, the one you just worked and the one coming up. Go in that single crochet and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go in the center of that next shell and work a single crochet. hop to that next single crochet in between the shells and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go in between the center of that next shell and work a single crochet. Go in that single crochet in between the shells and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, 3, and 4. Okay. Go into that next shell and work a single crochet right in the middle of it. Go in that single crochet in between the next 2 shells and work 4 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now to finish the row, what we're going to do is work a single crochet into the turning chain space. So here you can see on the end we have 2 double crochets, see them? And then we have our turning chain that comes out the side here. In that space that it created, work a single crochet right in that turning chain space. Okay? So here is our progress. We have some beautiful texture. And let me just zoom out so you can see a little bit better. This is the beginning of our piece. So what we're going to do next is we're going to keep repeating row 2 over and over and over again until it is long enough to comfortably wrap around your body. You can use the photo for reference at either the beginning of this video or on the blog. You can click the link down below and see more photos on the blog. But you can see how it's wrapped, and you want to make it so that it's large enough to comfortably fit around you, okay? So what we're going to do, I'll give you some measurements when we return, but I'm going to keep working my row 2. But before we start finishing this off and seaming it and assembling it, we're going to rejoin for just a minute. I'm going to show you how to switch colors when you're ready to switch colors. So keep going with your piece by repeating row 2 over and over and over again. And when we rejoin, we're going to learn how to change colors if you're doing some color changes like I am. Or you can just keep going with a solid color. But even if you're adding a new ball of yarn, you might want to know and see this next part. And then finally, we're going to assemble it by seaming, and we're going to take care of some of these ends and add our cute little decorative buttons. So keep going with row 2, and we'll rejoin in just a moment. Okay, I stitched up the next section. I changed colors once so I could show you. See how these shells interact? They look so pretty. Let me show you real quick how to join a new color if you're wondering. Now there's a bunch of ways to join yarn. If you have a preferred way, definitely feel free to do that. But what I'm going to do here, because we're ending at the end of the row, I'm just going to cut the yarn and tie the new yarn on. Now I didn't have quite enough yarn to begin a new row, so we're gonna, and I have about, it's a roughly the same length. This one's a little bit longer, but give or take. So I'm just going to cut the yarn. And then I'm going to take my hook, wrap the yarn around the hook, and fasten off. So just bring it through the loop. And then we can grab our new yarn, which is this first color that we used, the darker color. And I'm just going to go into that last stitch that I worked, where I fastened off, and put my hook in there. And then I'm going to take the new yarn and I'm going to hook it on. We're only changing colors a couple times, so the ends won't be too bad, just a few. And then I'm just going to tie it right on. I'm going to tie it once, tie it twice to make a nice strong little knot, and then you're ready to go. So you can just go in and keep repeating your rows. Let me get you started. What I did was I reinserted my hook back into that same stitch where I just tied the yarn on, bring up a loop, and chain 3. 1, 2, 3, turn your work. This should all seem pretty familiar if you've come along with me on these rows. And then in that same stitch, work your 2 double crochet, 1 and 2, and so forth. So just keep going with your rows of the closed shells. And I'm going to continue with this darker color. And then when I get to the end of that section, I'm going to continue and finish up with this lighter color. I'm just going to alternate sort of like a color block. So keep going with your rows however you want to change colors. You don't have to. You could just keep going with the same color. You could do thinner stripes, whatever you like. But keep going with your rows. And when we get to the end of our project, on that last row that we're going to be working, we're going to rejoin, and I'm going to show you how we're going to finish this off and kind of do some assembly, and I'm going to show you how to do the button part next. Just working that last stitch at the end of the row. And now we're ready to create some button loops. They're not going to be holes, they're going to be little loops at the top of some of these scallops. But in order to do that, we need to space them evenly, okay? So the idea is going to be later, when we're done this last edge, we're going to sew some buttons along the other edge of our shawl. Okay, to help us with our placement, I'm going to bring the other edge over so you can see here. And our buttons, now I said earlier in the video that we're going to have some... these are print. I'm just flipping them over because I like the plain wood for this particular piece. But in order to help you know where to put your button loops, you can try placing your buttons and just sort of moving them around and figuring it out. So stitch markers or some scrap yarn will be helpful as well, because we're going to put some markers in so we know where to create our loops. So if we look at the top edge of our piece, and I'm just going to move my hook out of the way. We don't want to cut the yarn yet. We're going to use just a tiny little bit of yarn, and I'm hoping, I'm playing yarn chicken a little bit here, but I'm hoping that it'll take me across. If not, I can rip out the last row, and you can do that too if you are trying to get your yarn to the end here. I grabbed 4 stitch markers because I have 4 buttons. And what we're going to do is we're going to put stitch markers. Our loops will be in the centers of these shells, okay? So remember, each one of our shell had 4 double crochets, so that space in the middle of our shell is where we're going to place our markers. But we want to make sure that they're going to be evenly spaced. So I'm going to skip see where we left off here is a loop. That's where we left off. So the end of the row here. I'm going to skip that first shell, and then in the next shell, I'm going to put a marker right in the middle here of that next shell. Then I'm going to skip the next shell, and in the shell after that, I'm going to put another marker right in the center in between the double crochets. So you'll have 2 double crochets, place your marker, and then 2 double crochets. So right in the middle of that shell. Then we're going to skip the next shell. In the shell after that, we'll place a marker in the center of the shell. And then when we come to the end here, we're going to skip a shell, and then that last full shell, we'll put a marker. Now, the way this stitch works, and you've seen this with your piece, is this is sort of a half shell. I'm going to kind of count it as one of the shells, okay? And that's the best we can space them here to make sure they're even, okay? So now we know where to put our little button loops, and it will correspond later to how we'll sew them onto our piece. We're going to line it up and match it. Okay, so what we want to do is grab our hook again. I'm going to slide these buttons over, and we're going to zoom in so I can show you how to do this last row. Now, as a side note, if you don't want your shawl to be buttoned, you can just skip this whole part and fasten off right now and be done, okay? But what I'm going to do is show you how to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our work. We're not going to chain or anything like that. We're going to be working slip stitches because I do want to keep this pretty scalloped edge as much as possible. It looks very decorative and nice. So in that first stitch that you see, work a slip stitch. Insert the hook into that stitch, bring up a loop, and bring that loop through the loop that's already on your hook. And that's it. And then in each stitch across, we're going to work a slip stitch. So slip stitch, slip stitch, slip stitch, all the way across. Now we've worked through our shells. You're also going to work a slip stitch in that single crochet in between your shells as well. And slip stitch, and slip stitch. And now we're at our stitch marker, okay? So when you get to each one of your stitch markers, now it's in a space, so we're not working anything into that, but we're going to, when we see a stitch marker, we're going to chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we're going to kind of scoot that over, and then in that next stitch, work your slip stitch, and we're just going to do this all the way across. Okay, just keep going with your slip stitches, and make sure you get the one in between the shells as well. Now let me just move my hook out of the way here, and we can now take this stitch marker off, and it will be out of the way. You can see a little bit better. This is my stitch, so I'm going to keep that in a loop. But we have this nice little loop now. Before you proceed, make sure you can pass your button through, okay? If you can't, make some more chains. Instead of the 6, try making 8 or 12 or however big your buttons are, okay? All right, let's keep going with our slip stitches across. Slip stitch. And we're coming up towards another stitch marker, and you can see also our slip stitches, we still have that lovely scallop as well. You can see that on the edge. So just keep going with your slip stitches. All right, we're at another stitch marker. So we're going to work our slip stitch in that stitch before it, chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you can take your stitch marker out so it's not in your way, and then slip stitch into the next stitch, okay? And we're going to keep going till we get to the next stitch marker. Okay, we're a little more than halfway across. Hoping I'll have enough yarn here. I have just this tiny amount. I wanted to take it as far as I could. But if you feel a little unsure, just hold off on working that last row and you'll have plenty of yarn. Okay, we're at another stitch marker. Actually, let me back up because that looked a little loose. Anytime you have a stitch that you make that you're not crazy about, just pull it out and redo it. It's worth it instead of having this stitch that you'll be staring at that you don't like when your piece is completed. All right, we're at our stitch marker, so take your stitch marker out and chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't mention this before, but if you have small buttons, you can do less chains. That's totally fine too. And we're just going to keep working our slip stitches in every stitch across. We have just one stitch marker left. We're in the home stretch. I think I'm going to be okay with my yarn. Comment below if this has ever happened to you, if you've played yarn chicken like me, to see if you won or the yarn won. Sometimes we get into a little bit of a jam and we have to rip it back a little or add a new ball for just a couple of stitches, which can be frustrating. Okay, we're at our next stitch marker. I'm going to remove it. This is the last one. Chain 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Come back down to that stitch rather, and work a slip stitch. These little loops are looking really nice, and keep going. And we're at the end. Yay, we did it. We made it. We still had some yarn. I was really wondering there for a minute. All right, and then when you get to the end, work a slip stitch in that last stitch, and then work a slip stitch in that turning chain space. The same way we did with our other rows, it will just mimic the same look, okay? We are at the end. So let me zoom out. You can see all the lovely little button loops that we created. Let me get these stitch markers out of the way here. All right, so we're just gonna cut the yarn. I don't really need to, it's so short. And then fasten off. All right, we have a few more things to do. I do have some of the dark green, a little scrap of that, which we'll want for our button sewing, but I'm gonna grab that in just a minute. I did have a little bit of that left. Okay, so I did weave some of my ends in already. Oh, here's a stitch marker. I kept hearing it, but I couldn't find it. Okay, let's just weave in this last end together. Grab your tapestry needle and thread it. And then what you're going to do is just go into your work in one direction, staying in the middle of those stitches so you're not showing on either side. And you want to stay, now my stripes are very thick, but if you had thinner stripes, you want to stay in the same color, otherwise you'll see that tail going through your work. I went in one direction and I'm going to come back in the other direction to kind of lock that tail in there. And then grab your scissors and the crochet part of our shawl is complete. And I just love these colors together. They're so, remind me so much of winter. I just love that look. Okay, so let's look at our handiwork. We have some really nice edges here where we created our buttonholes, or button loops rather. So what we need to do, the last thing we need to do is put our buttons on. So let's bring the two edges together. And you may find this was our starting chain. This is where we began. You may find that this might be a little bit like looser and kind of wider and stretchier than this edge. That happens sometimes. That's okay. The main thing here is that, I'm just turning this so you can see it better, but the main thing here is that we're going to put the buttons, and this is going to overlap and create this lovely buttoned edge here. Okay, if it's a little bit wider, it's okay. It's normal. The way that the different edges behave, you might find one is stretchier than the other, just because we've done them differently. This is stitches, and this was a starting chain, so it will behave a little bit differently, but it's not too dramatic. Okay, so let's get our buttons in place. We're going to put them how they correspond to the loops here, and I'm going to pull this back a little bit because I don't want them so far up. I want to slide them down. But you just want to make sure that your buttons are going to match with your loops, okay? So I'm putting them, let me give you a measurement so you can replicate it if you want. From our edge, see how they correspond to the scallops like how we did before? I'm going about 1 inch up from the bottom edge of the button, okay? Oh, and then just in case I didn't mention this before, these are 1 inch wide. So they're 1 inch wide, and I went 1 inch up from the bottom, okay? So let's grab our matching yarn. I want to grab the same color. If you want to use this contrasting color, that would be equally interesting too. It's completely up to you. It's your design choice. Okay, so I discovered the tapestry needle I used earlier in the video. It's a little bit big for my buttons. So depending on the buttons you're using, just make sure your needle can pass easily through. Now I'm a little bit nitpicky when I sew buttons on. I don't like everything to be turned. I want all of my, these little holes in the center of your buttons, I want them all to be lined up. It's just, I don't know, something that's important to me. So just make sure that your buttons are lined up nice and neat. They correspond to your loops that you created. And I like to keep everything flat so nothing is shifting around, and just kind of do the best you can. So what we're going to do is cut a piece of yarn, I would say about 12 inches long. And you're going to thread your tapestry needle, the one that you know fits through your button, and just thread it. And then carefully, as to not disturb the other buttons, we're going to come up from the bottom, and we're just going to put a couple of strong little stitches in here. We're going to come up, leaving a little tail, leave that little tail there, and go back down. And then come up. I'm trying to keep my edge parallel to my button stitch, okay? So if that's not something that bothers you, then don't worry about it at all, but I like to just have everything lined up. All right, now we're going to flip it over carefully, and we're just going to tie this right on. Now, this is up to you. You can weave in these ends, or you can trim them flush to the back of your shawl. It's completely up to you. The main thing is, though, that they're strong. And they're going to stay put. So however you want to do it is completely up to you. I'm going to weave mine in, but you can trim them flush to the back. Okay, so double checking, making sure that it's still lined up. We're going to cut another little piece of yarn. And I love how it's the same color as this. Like I said before, if you wanted to use your other color, you can do that too. It will all look very pretty. All right, make sure you can use your stitches See how I have a row here? They're kind of along the edge of that row. You can use that as a guide. All right, I'm going to hold my button in place, and I'm just going to come up from the back, okay? Now, just repeat this. Don't pull it all the way through. Leave a little tail. But just repeat this for the rest of your buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the rest of my buttons on. And when we rejoin, we'll weave in some ends and button it up and check out our handiwork. Okay, our buttons are all on and they look wonderful. Let's take our top part and we'll just do a little test. Let's get it buttoned up and look at it. So our loops go over very nicely. Again, if you're not using this 1-inch size, you can change the number of chains for your loops. Just experiment a little bit. When I was working on this piece, I tried 4 chains, I tried 10 chains, so I tried different things, and this was the one that worked best for my buttons, the 6 chains. Okay, so pretty, and you can kind of fix them up a little. And our button shawl is complete. It looks awesome, and it is reversible. Even though it's buttoned, it's reversible, so if you wore it unbuttoned, you could kind of wear it any which way, and it just looks so lovely for the cool weather ahead. So that is how you crochet the silver spruce button shawl. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiber Flux video updates. Thanks again.